Welcome to another episode of Chasing the Wind. I'm Pastor Mark. I want to talk to you about something, and good luck tracking with me today. This is one of those things that I scare myself sometimes when I think about these things and try to process through it. I've been doing some teaching on Wednesday night at my church on the Beatitudes, holiness in the Beatitudes, and last night. So this is a Thursday. So last night we were talking about charitability, being charitable, that sort of thing, and it led us into a discussion about giving and et cetera, et cetera. And that's always giving to the poor, and who do you give to, should you give to, and yet when is it enabling, and et cetera, and all sorts of fun things. It's never an easy thing, and yet maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't know. So I'm going to just kind of see where this tracks. Okay. So I was pondering this verse from Matthew 5:42. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. There is another spot in Scripture where it talks about lend to the one who asks. It's very interesting. Jesus talked about money more than just about anything, and because money tends to kind of corrupt us and mess us up sometimes. But I was pondering this a little bit, and I thought, well, Jesus, I was driving in actually this morning and thinking about this, and I'm like, well, Jesus, if we're supposed to lend without expecting to be repaid, then I'm not going to ask you to give me things. I'm going to just ask you to lend them to me so that I don't have to worry about repaying it or paying it forward or anything like that. I don't really mean that, by the way. But it's an interesting thing because we talked about this idea. Okay, so if we're supposed to do what Jesus says, he says, give to the one who asks you and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. Wow, that's pretty hard. Because and this was a discussion we kind of had last night. When is giving to someone hurtful to them and not helpful to them? Or as a friend of mine talks about in the organization that they lead, they focus on giving a hand up, not necessarily a hand out. They are about redemptive compassion. And so it's about how can we help this person, but also at the same time, what is the thing they really need help with? So a person says, well, calls up to church, says, hey, pastor, I need you to help me with my rent. Yeah, but I'm like, this is the fourth time in a row. Well, I'm just coming up short. Well, do you know why you're coming up short? Nope, I don't know why. I just bought my kid $500 gaming goggles. Yeah, but your kid's only with you 2 days a week, and does he take them with him? No, they stay here. Well, what happens when they're there? Well, I use them. Oh, so you really bought them for you, not for, but that's just me. What is the most helpful thing we can do? And sometimes the thing is that we need to say no. But wait a minute. This scripture says we're supposed to give without hesitation. But what if that thing, and my understanding is this happens a lot of times when in some places where maybe a drug addict says, hey, do you got $20? I need to get a hit. Well, okay, now I'm in a conundrum because the Bible says that I'm supposed to just give to them. But I know that if I give to them, that it's not a good thing. These are moral and ethical issues that we have to really ponder. And to say, well, God, am I really supposed to do that? Now, of course, we could argue, well, Jesus probably didn't have drug addicts like we do today, or an alcoholic, or someone who's just not not a good steward. And we are supposed to encourage people to be good stewards. There's all sorts of these things that go on, and we have to think about. And so, pondering this, and maybe we even say, God, how come, Lord, I've asked you for something, because then you got to ask yourself the question, is Jesus following his own words? That's gone through my mind a little bit. Well, Jesus, you want me to do it, but are you doing it? And here's interesting, because I'm like, God, there's some things I've asked you for that you have not come through for. And they're not money necessarily. They're other things. So what do we do with that? That, God, wait a minute here. You're telling me that I'm supposed to give. And of course, this is, the context is eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. If someone forces you to go a mile, go two with them, okay? Give to the one who asks you. So there is a piece of generosity here. But also, when we look at the life of Jesus, there was times he said no. There was times he said no. I remember someone saying, oh, Jesus never says no. He says not yet. No, sometimes Jesus says no. And God says no. And James tells us in chapter 4, we go back there a little bit. James chapter 4, where's he at? Running around here somewhere. There he is. That he says, you do not have because you do not ask God. And when you do ask, you don't receive because you ask with the wrong motives, that you spend what you get on your pleasures. And, hey, you work hard for your money. It's okay to go spend a little bit on your pleasures. But it's always interesting to me when people say, well, Pastor, I can't give to that cause, or I can't give to the church because, I got some things I need to get. And then they go get, things, they get things that are wasteful. And so it's always a tricky situation, but it does come down to our motives. Jesus even goes on to say in chapter 6 of Matthew, when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that the giving may be done in secret. Your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. Okay, and so we can get into these things, and there is a piece of this generosity. And why are we doing what we're supposed to be doing? So there's a big question that comes up a lot these days that I get here. Well, what is the most loving thing that we can do? I have heard this regarding, pronouns. Well, isn't the most loving thing we can do is to call them by their pronouns? I'm not so sure if it's keeping them in a state of brokenness, or how about anything else? Well, yeah, go ahead and get that divorce. It's okay. They didn't buy you, your husband didn't buy you that Mercedes you wanted. So yeah, I'd call that marital unfaithfulness. No, probably not. Probably not. That would probably, that one I'd probably have to give accountability for. And I haven't said that, by the way. But that would be the most loving thing to do, is to affirm their thinking on something. And no, it's not. Maybe the most loving thing to do is to not give that person the money. Or here, if you really want to know the most loving thing to do, and this happened to me one time when I was pastoring my churches, a guy called. He said, yeah, could you help me with some money for a meal? I need a meal. He goes, I'm down here at McDonald's. It was just a couple blocks away. I said, well, sure, I'll head down there right now. And I go down there, and he was waiting for some money. I said, come on. I said, well, go up. I said, let me, just order what you want. And he gave me the funniest look, and by the way, he didn't look like he needed the food. He looked like he'd already eaten. So, okay. So we go up there, and he orders, and I'm kind of standing there waiting. I paid for his food. I didn't get anything. And so he goes, I said, well, why don't you get it for here? And I said, no, I'll join you. Oh my gosh, you should have seen the look on his face for that one. Well, I didn't expect that. He didn't want to sit there and he wanted, and I know he wanted the money. Okay, well, Pastor, you don't know that. Yeah, I think I'm right on this one. There is a thing called stewardship that we don't teach in the church, but is one of the biggest things that Jesus talked about was stewardship, being a good manager of our finances, of our time, of other things. It's always amazing to me when people say, well, Pastor, I do that, but I don't have time. I got things to do. Okay, but you call this your church. You say, this is my church. I go to this church. Yeah, but you're unwilling to help. That's not a good steward. Okay. I know I missed that one, Wind Chasers, because that's why the pastor gets paid the big bucks. Mm-hmm. It's his job. Folks, here's what I'm talking about. It can be a sticky wicket. But, as people say, when I read this verse that says give to anyone, what do we do with that? And that's one of those verses you want to throw back at Jesus. Well, Jesus, if you told me to do it, shouldn't you be doing it? And I've asked you for $1 million and you haven't given it to me yet. What do we do with that? What do we do with that? And I think what we do with it is we need to realize that Jesus knows that there are some things we ask for that are not in our best interest. A parent is not going to say when their toddler says, I want to go out and play in the middle of a busy road at rush hour or at 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon when everybody's tired from work. They're going home. Well, some people are tired from working and going home, and they're maybe not going to see that toddler out there on the road. And but I love my toddler, so I'm going to let them do what they want. No, that's not a good thing to do. The most loving thing to do in that situation is to say, no, you're not going out there and doing that. And that's part of the problem, I think, in our culture today, is that we haven't been told no. I had someone tell me one time that God never tells us no. He always says yes or not yet. And that is garbage. There are times God says no to me and says, no, that's not a good thing, Mark. And sometimes we're told our prayers are not answered because we're asking with the wrong motive. And it is for selfish reasons. Instead of saying, wait a minute here, God, how can I better glorify you? And we don't want to glorify God. We just want to hand out. We don't want to hand up. And God is about our transformation, helping us to become who he is. Now, I know you may disagree with me, and that's perfectly fine with me. You don't have to agree with me at all. But I do think it's something that we need to think about. And, if you're going to adopt this philosophy, well, I think this is what Jesus meant. So if I ask you for money, Pastor Mark, you're just supposed to give it to me. Well, if you're a believer, how about I ask you for that money right back then? You loan it back to me. How about that? You see, this is where we can get into sticky wickets with things if we're not careful. We need to really think about our motives on things. And sometimes, granted, there are people that need money, without a doubt. And I have helped people. You have helped people. People have helped me. We need to be careful, though, that when we say, and this would be, well, we got to take the Bible literally. Okay, well then, I'm gonna help you with that, and let ask God to send you some people to ask you for money. Well, wait a minute, Pastor. That's just for you. That's just for you pastors. No, it's not. No, it's not. Now, in the context, we got to take it in context. Jesus is talking about someone strikes you on the cheek, turn the other one. Turn the other one. And so then he says this, give to the one who asked you and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. The context would suggest this is someone that you don't necessarily want to be generous with. And granted, sometimes you just do it. If the Lord tells you to give to someone, and you give it to them, well, yeah, but, and I had that happen to me one time, and I was like, God, I can't give them that money you're telling me to give them because they're clean right now from their drugs. They just told me they've been clean for 3 months. And I said, God, you just don't do that. You should have heard that conversation going on. And God says, Mark, I just want you to do it. Don't worry about the results. I'll take care of that. I just want you to do that. And it ended up being a boost for this young man, and I think it helped him in the moment. It can be an interesting thing, but those are the things that I'm kind of just pondering right now. Is God is if I give this, and if you tell me to, I'll do it. But if I do this, and I had a buddy. He's like, this guy came to him, and it was like the third or fourth time the church had helped him with his rent, and finally, my buddy said, well, what is your plan to get a job? And he goes, I don't plan on getting a job. But wait a minute, now that's a biblical concept. No work, no eat. What do we do with that? What do we do with that? And so we have things that we need to look at and say, wait a minute here, what do we do with that? And so we have to look at it and say, wait a minute, God, what do you want me to do in this situation? Maybe the most generous thing we can do is to say, I'm not going to loan you that money right now, or I'm not going to loan you my car, or whatever the case is. And generosity is an interesting thing. We are to be generous. Matter of fact, that's what the New Testament teaches, that we're to be generous in our giving, especially to the Lord, and where we feel we're needing to do that. Usually what we want, though, is we want to be on the receiving end of generosity. We don't want to be on the giving end of generosity. And so I'm just going to let you chew on that one a little bit, wind chasers. And, that's just what's been going through my mind. I've had to try and navigate that for 35 years of pastoral ministry, 31 years, I guess, of pastoral ministry, not counting when I was in college preparing. But it can be an interesting thing. And so I will tell you, the one thing is to listen to the Lord and ask the Lord in this situation, is this the best thing I can do? God has certainly been generous with us. There's no doubt about that. But is it the thing we're supposed to do? And what do we do with that? So I'm going to let you chew on that, wind chasers. Until next time, keep chasing the wind because the wind is chasing on. Pastor Mark, grace and peace.